we have to be careful where we put ourselves to grow because not everyone is for you. Not everyone is for us. Hello, welcome to the Overwhelmed to Resilient podcast. I'm Dr. Phyllis Hayes Reams, your host. Today is episode number 8, Setting Boundaries, a Tale of Two Tomato Plants. Now, many of you know that I have this running joke with myself. I call myself the accidental gardener. And you've heard me talk about this quite a bit, that I've always wanted an organic garden. And I just like when I put furniture together, I don't always follow the instructions. I'll be honest. I've had to learn to do that. But with my gardening, I have been known to just stick things in the ground, water them, and keep it moving. So there's a whole story about me and sweet potatoes. We'll have to talk about that in a future episode. But so recently, actually not recently, but it's been months now that I planted tomatoes. And I learned a lot from these two tomato plants. They're side by side, which I found out later. I figured out that I think, number one, I planted them too close to each other. But what I noticed is, and they're two different types. One's a Roma tomato plant. The other one is, I forgot the type, but it's more of your usual round tomato. It's not a Roma. And the round tomato plant was just flourishing. It just flourished all summer into the fall. And then my Roma plant, which those are like, they're Roma tomatoes. Those are the ones that are like ovals. And that one, they weren't really growing at first. And then when they started growing at the same time as the round tomatoes were growing, I noticed that the Roma tomatoes would get this like dark circle at the bottom. And I went, you all know me. Now, I'm going to YouTube and figure out or Google why this was happening. Okay. And I found out that it wasn't getting enough water. So what happens is when it's not getting enough water, it basically rots on the bottom. So they call it tomato rot. And which means we would call it necrosis, which means death, right? It's dying at the end because it's not getting enough water. And this went on and on. Now the round tomatoes they're just flourishing. They're growing, they're beautiful. I think they're called Heirloom. That's what it is. They're beautiful. So we were eating them. They were beautiful. And eventually I started clipping the Roma tomatoes early because if I left them on till they ripened to red, they would get the rot on the end. So over time, as the round tomatoes, they started to decrease because they're more seasonal. They started to decrease in the blooming and growing, right? Then I noticed some red Roma tomatoes, gigantic Roma tomatoes growing that I hadn't noticed. They were inside, so I wasn't seeing them. So as the round tomatoes stopped growing, the Roma tomatoes started growing. And I wasn't seeing the rot anymore. It hit me. What these two tomato plants were showing was the importance of boundaries. The reason I say that is, number one, we have to be careful where we choose to grow. I'm going to set that with you. I want you to think about that. Number one, we have to be careful where we put ourselves to grow, because not everyone is for you. Not everyone is for us. As Christians, or different personalities. So you have to be very careful, because it's really about water, right? It's about the life force. And that's what water is. We all need water. Be plants. I mean, there's cactus. They don't need as much water, but they need some water. Okay. You have to be careful, because, as I said, not everyone's for you. So these two tomato plants were basically thrust together, right, into this close area. And what happened was the round tomato, the heirloom tomato, was pulling most of the water. It's just the way their roots were, their season. So they were pulling most of the water. And they were growing all into the Roma tomatoes. And so they were pulling the water. That's why they were growing. And the Roma tomatoes, the oval tomatoes, we're left to just try to grow on whatever water was left over. And then, let me back up. So you first have to be careful where you grow and what you're growing next to. Because the round tomatoes, they're just like certain people in situations, will sap your energy. And while you're giving all your life force and your energy to them, you have none left. And I'm just going to say, you end up dying on the vine. Been there, done that. As you're giving to others, sometimes because you want to, sometimes because you are kind of guilted into, or because you're so conscientious, you're just giving, waiting to see a result, waiting for someone to give you a result. So you're giving to them and propping them up and doing for them. And they're growing and you're not. So that was one thing I learned about why it's important to set boundaries. The other thing is what I noticed is just within the vine itself, the one Roma tomato vine. So we have one situation where the heirloom tomato vine was pulling the water from the Roma tomato, right? And we have to be very careful that other outside situations and people are not pulling from our energy and life force, okay? And then we have the one Roma vine. So let's switch to that. And that can be our support, our family, our friends, our close-knit circle, or people that we have allowed into our circle, our village, our community, as I stated. Just like that Roma tomato plant vine, it's technically a vine, is that I noticed that certain Roma tomatoes, if they were left too long on the vine, and let's say that they rotted, right? They weren't growing. I'm sorry. Forgive me if that's a little extreme, but that's what it is. It's rot. It's a dying, tomato on the vine. That if you don't clip what's dying, the dying tomato on the vine, that one Roma vine was still feeding, still giving water to what was rotted, what was dying, and pulling that water, that life force, that energy away from the other Roma tomatoes that we're trying to grow. Now, so what does that mean? Even within our support, our personal support, it may be family, it may be friends, it may be relationships that have been in our world or we've been a part of that are no longer living. They're no longer growing. Their season has passed. And we have to clip it. So I categorize those type of relationships and situations that have served their purpose. And it may be a relationship that's been for years and it served its purpose, or maybe it never really served the right type of purpose in our lives. But now it's time to clip it off, because as long as you let it stay in that person, that situation, as long as you let it stay in your life, it's going to continue to pull on you. It's dying. Or it's completed. It's done what it needed to do. But you're continually channeling your energy, your time, your spirit, your physical strength into it. And it's continuing to die. It's continuing not to grow. But while you're pouring all of your energy and all of your focus and all your time into that, you're drawing away from what needs to grow. And then you're allowing that to spread. 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 So I learned a lot from that tomato vine. And I think it's so exemplary. It's what we deal with in life, that sometimes we have to clip things off. Because once I, number one, realized that as soon as I saw one that wasn't, it was gone. It was done. I clipped it off. It allowed the water to be better used by those other tomatoes. Because once it's dying, there's nothing you can do about it. There's nothing you can do about it as a human being. The only one who can resurrect that is God. Okay? You cannot humanly cure a dying tomato. Just like you cannot humanly fix someone who they have some challenges. You can't fix them. You have to have boundaries. You have to know what you're able to do and what God is able to do. You have to know what God has for you to do and what God has for someone else to do. Your first responsibility is to be everything that God has created you to be. Now, part of that is going to be helping other people, but you go to God to give you guidance on what you need to do. You're not here to fix people. Fixing and trying to help is two different things. And often we mask our own insecurity or feeling of powerlessness by pouring it into other people instead of really spending time with God and saying, okay, Lord, what is it that I need to do? Because understand me, it's scary. It's scary. But I'm a living witness to say it's definitely possible. Transformation is obtainable. It's never too late. It's liberating. And sometimes when we reach that transformation, it can be the first time in our life. I can tell you, this is the first time in my life over the past about 5 years that I truly am feeling present. I'm content. Yeah, life is crazy, but I'm content. And that's why I'm so excited about being able to compress time for you and other members of our overwhelmed to resilient community, because I've been there. And I want you to have the courage and the resilience to clip what's rotten on the vine. It's hard. But when you can do it, oh my gosh, it's so liberating. It's scary. But when you take that first step, oh my gosh, it just changes how you live life. And when you create, I call them almost like, I tell my kids that I feel like life is like if you were to cut a tree trunk crossways and you see the rings. In the center, we sit with God through Jesus Christ. And then we have the other little ring is our closest of close support. And then every ring, concentric ring going outward, are different circles that we take part of and influence. But there's certain people and situations, they need to be at the outermost rings of that tree. Outermost. Because there's a time and place for them, but they're not adding to our growth. So we have to put people in certain categories so that we use our energy in the best way. So just like that Roma tomato plant, I'm back to that. You have to know, number one, what is pulling at your life force? What's pulling you? What's making you feel so tired or defeated? I want to say what's making you feel defeated, deflated, depleted. Because you already know you feel that way. You know you feel that way. You're just trying to figure out what is making you feel that way. And a large part, I know, is boundaries. And it's hard because as Christian women, we feel like we're not being Christian hearted if we're not helping or saying yes. And there's a part of us that we live in an age of likes, right? And the more likes we have, we feel like we're popular, or if we're liked, we're going to get that promotion, or we're going to feel happy, or we're going to, if people like us, we're good people. We have to learn to love ourselves. You've heard me talk about that. And that is a journey in itself. But we can only even get to that part. We could only get to that innermost part when we cut out the noise, until we we clip those people and those situations that are no longer giving us life or adding life force, but are pulling away from us. We have to clip them. We got to clip it and continue to water and pour into ourselves. I I pray for you today because I know you're out there, that God gives you courage today. You are not, you're not crazy. You're right. You're feeling depleted. You're feeling defeated. You know that there's something else out there for you. You know it. I can feel you right now. You're wherever you are listening to this or watching me, because I know that I'm not alone. I know how that feels. So I know you're out there too, feeling the same way. You know, there's got to be something more. And what's fighting, the fighting that, or the battle, that's really what I mean. You're this inner battle. But you can feel like you're in a fight, an internal fight, an internal battle, is that you feel like, well, it's too late. I've invested time to do this, but I know there's more. I'm just, this is no longer where I'm at, is no longer suiting me. It's no longer feeling like I'm growing. I feel stuck. I feel, as I said, depleted. I don't have the energy. I don't feel motivated to get up and get going, because where I'm at right now is no longer giving me contentment, is no longer making me have peace. I feel like there's more. And I can tell you, sis, it's because there is. God is talking to you right now to tell you one of several things. A, it's time to move on from where you're at. It's time for you to stop spreading your attention and your focus into directions that is no longer or never was suiting his purpose for you. Number 3 is he's calling you to get out of the comfort zone of staying where you're at in situations and around people that they're happy to not be growing. And the secret is they don't want you to grow either. So that's why you have to get into new situations, potentially around new people, or you just have to cut down your circle and focus on those who are adding life to you instead of taking away from you. I know you have the power, because all of us, and the premise of this podcast is that we are born with resilience. We're born with it. It's a flame inside of us. It's a light that God has created us with, we're born with, but often life covers it, right? It's a smoldering, right? It's a smoldering flame that's just under all the stuff, the daily grind, the relationships that no longer suit us. It's hidden, or not taking care of ourselves, just our heads just full of so many things and to-dos and and just swirling, where you just feel like your head's about to explode. But in the midst of that is that flickering light of resilience. And it's my prayer through this podcast, through me connecting with you, through my coaching programs, through my lives, that I will be able to let you know and help you in whatever way that I can to turn up the dial on that inner light of resilience, so it becomes a flame that lightens your path, it warms your heart, it encourages you to a point that you can create, you can transform your life so that you have, I call it 360 vision, 360 presence, 360 peace and joy, 360 degrees through spiritual mindset. Spiritual reset is what I call it. Mind reset and physical reset. And you can do it. And if you need help, I'm right here. I look forward to having you join me again for the next episode. We got some good stuff coming up as we're leading into the holidays, which is a very stressful time. So I hope you will tune in as I continue on my mission to help uplift and empower you. Love you, sis. Take care. I'll see you next time on Overwhelmed to Resilient. Take care. Bye-bye now.